Stop being afraid to fail. Instead, I want you to visualize failure and accept the outcome. Here's what I mean by that. Brian Tracy often talks about WPO, and that's worst possible outcome. So anytime I go into a situation, I consider what is the worst possible outcome. And then I visualize that worst possible outcome and say, hey, if the worst that could happen, would I still be okay? For instance, in my real estate business, worst possible outcome is the deal doesn't close, the client loses the property or the escrow, and I'm right back here where I am today. And at the signing of every deal, at the signing of every contract, what do I say? Worst possible outcome is this doesn't happen. This doesn't work. Am I okay with that? My answer is yes. If I am having conversations with my wife and I say, well, what's the worst possible outcome? Once I become okay, or once I realize what that worst possible outcome is, now I get to adjust my responses accordingly. Now, here's what we often do is that oftentimes we will fail to make a decision, fail to try anything because we've never visualized, we've never thought about an actual worst possible outcome. What do I mean? We think that if we make the phone call and if we get rejected and say no, that our world is over. What's the reality? The reality is if someone rejects us, it's just simply that, a rejection. Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't like being rejected no more than anyone else. I'm not going to be so naive as to sit here and say, the more no's you get closer to a yes. What I am going to ask, how much is that no going to impact your future? What's the worst that could happen? So one of the things that I have done in my life since the passing of my father is I've wanted to live a life with no regrets. So what I have learned to do after listening to Brian Tracy, whom my father introduced me to, was to take a WPO stance in almost every situation that I go into. What's the worst that could happen? Once I realize what a realistic worst case scenario is, guess what? Anything better than that is a win. Once you become okay with whatever the WPO is, guess what? Fear has now lost its power. It no longer has an edge on you. Because something that I've learned and a way that I live is that every decision we make involves risk. Every decision involves risk, the consequences of which can only be determined after the decision is made. So while the decision might involve risk and we only know the consequences after the decision is made, what if at the front end of this decision-making process, what if we said, what's the worst that could happen? If the worst does happen, would you still be okay? More than likely, the reality is there are very few things that are going to be so detrimental that you're not going to be okay at the end of it. And in the event that it is as bad as the worst possible outcome, then you get to decide, do I take this chance? Do I make this move or not? Here's what I know. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, more dreams are postponed, failed, or missed, not because people tried and failed, but because they didn't try at all. And so hopefully today, you will look at some areas that you've been double dutching on, some areas where you have yet to really put your toe in or to even attempt, and say, well, what's the worst that could happen? Now, what's the likelihood of the worst happening? You might find that it's very small. We know that God made us creative beings. He gave us this thing called a powerful mind, and it is so powerful, in fact, that it can create all types of wild and outlandish scenarios, things that would never happen in reality. And so I just want to ask you, in what area today, in your business, in your relationships, in your finances, in your health, in terms of your dreams and your goals in life, In what areas do you need to pause for a moment, write down the goal, dream, destination, end result that you want to achieve, and then ask, what's the worst possible outcome? What's the worst thing that could happen if I attempt this? And then ask yourself, if that does happen, if the worst possible outcome became a reality, would you still be okay? Chances are, more likely than not, you're going to say, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And anything better than the WPO is going to be a victory for you. So I hope that this reframed, reshaped, or even just introduced a new thought pattern in how you look at risk and decision making today. Looking for that worst possible outcome, being okay if the worst did happen, realizing that you still have what it takes to endure the worst. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, share it with a colleague, friend, or peer who might need to do some WPO thinking and assessment. Also, be sure to subscribe, leave in the comment section maybe one area of your life where worst possible outcome thinking might benefit you. I would love to hear it. I'll be here to comment and share with you as well. And most importantly, remember that I love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time I see you or you see me, don't be average, be world renowned. Peace.